This episode of Brains on Games is a preview of a dexterity game with ninjas. Welcome to Brains on Games. I'm Dr. Brian McDonald, and this episode we are going to talk about a dexterity game involving ninjas. What a perfect combination of ideas. It's a game that came to me not too long ago, and it's going to come up on Kickstarter very soon. I think even the day after this video post is when this game will go up. And like I said, it was sent to me recently by the folks at Guff Studios. It's a game called Floating Floors. This is a game for between 2 and 4 players. The game plays in 30 minutes to an hour. And you can play this game with kids. Well, it says in the rule book, age 14 and up, but I definitely think younger kids will be able to get the hang of this. And who wouldn't want to play a game with ninjas? Because they are just about the coolest theme that I can think of. Let's take a deeper look at Floating Floors. This is a light to medium, well, I said dexterity game earlier, but there is quite a bit of strategy. In fact, I think the strategy is probably just as or more important than the dexterity in this game. I won't go too deep into whether or not the components will fit in the box because it is a Kickstarter prototype, so things may change. Certainly the components that came with this prototype, everything fit and everything closed flat, so there were no issues there. It's a light to medium game in terms of its complexity because there is some strategy. It is not just about stacking things up or balancing things. There is a lot going on here that we will talk about. The game comes with 4 ninjas. There are 2 black ones and 2 white ones. Each color has one that stands up straight like this and one that's sort of in a martial arts pose. So they look alike. And if you're playing a 2-player game, each player is going to choose a different color. You've also got these seals, these bansen seals they're called, and they've got the pose of the ninja on them. So you've got the color and the pose. I don't know if you'll be able to see here, but here's the white one with the ninja who's doing his ninja kicks. You also have these wooden pieces that are called jutsu, and there are black ones and white ones, so they go with the particular ninja. There are hexes and cubes and prisms, and each game you're going to start with one of each of these. So the white player is going to have 3, and the black player will have 3 in those 3 different shapes. You've also got dice that you're going to roll at the beginning of your turn, and that's what's going to allow you to collect more of those jutsu pieces as you play, and there are never enough of those pieces to do what you would like to be able to do in this game. You start the game in a 2-player game. You've got 6 of these cards, and the terrain here is double-sided, so you've got a more difficult side here where there's only one spot of land and it's in the middle of a lake, but I've set it up for sort of the easy version of the game. One thing you can see from the prototype, this is a game that you're probably going to want to have some of those little silica gel packs in there to make sure that the pieces don't warp, because these terrain pieces don't quite sit flat right now. At the beginning of the game, once the players have chosen their color and the ninja that they want to play with, they're going to determine their starting location. So you choose a starting location around the map, and then you're going to gradually add these bansen seal pieces to the board. These are the things that you're trying to collect. The winner of the game is the first one to collect all of their seals. And in a 2-player game, each player is going to be trying to grab 4 of these. There are some variant rules that allow you to increase the difficulty or to balance out the playing field in terms of the skills of the players. So for example, the bansen seal pieces also have numbers on the opposite side. So in a more difficult version of the game, you might be playing on terrain that only has the 1 land piece, and you might be trying to collect your seals in order. Once the players have chosen their starting location, they're going to alternate and place their bansen seals around the outside of the board, and then the first player is going to roll these dice to determine which additional 3 jutsu they're going to start the game with. Once you've got your 6 pieces, and the dice you can see have some black and some white pieces on them. So even though I might be playing as the black player, I might have some white pieces and some black ones as the game goes forward. there are 3 places where players can collect their jutsu from. So you roll those dice, and then you may be choosing from, there's a public pool in the middle of the table that everybody can access, but you can also take jutsu from anywhere on the board, which becomes a really important strategy as the game goes forward. Right now, there's nothing on the board, so on your first turn, you're just going to grab from the public pool. And then if I'm the black player, I'm going to start placing jutsu and placing the floating floors that I'm going to walk across to create a path. Each of these floors are double-sided, with one side that has more white spaces and one side that has more black spaces. So as the black ninja, I'm going to want to probably place this one right here. And you just start placing jutsu, and then you balance your floorboard on it. And it is a tricky balance because you are rationing these little wooden pieces. You only get 3 per turn, and you may be able to get a pretty good balance with only 3 of these things. But as you move through the board, you're going to see it's not easy to move around. Once the jutsu are placed, I can start to put my floors on top, and you can continue as long as you want. There is a push your luck element to this game, so I can keep placing jutsu as long as I have them and add some floors to the map. One of the things I should note is that when you're placing jutsu on these terrain pieces in order to set a floor on top of them, you're only allowed to place them on the land spaces and not on these little lake spaces here. So on this part of the grid, I'm only going to be able to place those jutsu on the 2 sides here, which is going to make it a little bit harder to balance. Once you start placing the floors, you're going to want to begin moving your ninja to start collecting those seals. And like I said, you can do these actions as many times as you want, but you do start to push your luck when things are a little bit unbalanced. So you can only move 1 space at a time, and then you have to let go of your ninja to make sure that you don't tip everything over. You can also only stand on squares that are in your color or on jutsu that are in your color. So you may start to use jutsu to change the color of the square, so to speak, on that area of the board. If I want to move towards this area where there are 2 seals for me to grab, I'm going to slowly do so, and then I need to place another tile. Now this, like I said, is going to be a hard spot for me to balance my ninja on, but I'm going to need to place those 3 pieces. There's no way I'm going to be able to get this guy to move on here without adding some additional parts to the board. Now I've created this pathway that leads me towards these 2 seals that I'm trying to get, but because of the way the terrain is placed, I'm not going to be able to balance this ninja here, so I'm going to want to end my turn and allow the white player to take his or her turn because I'm going to tip things over. If you do tip things over, the game is not over. What will happen is if I put my ninja on here, and of course he's going to fall off, the other player gets to rearrange everything on the tile. So that player is going to want to make sure my ninja is as far away as possible and things are as unbalanced as possible to prevent me from getting to the seal in the corner. It's an interesting way of tackling failure in a dexterity game. It doesn't end your game. It doesn't completely mess up all of your plans, but it is likely to slow you down depending on what the other player does. The white player here has a real challenge. It's going to be hard for them even to get on the board because of the way the terrain here is placed. So if they draw their top card on the floor deck that you draw from, they might place it like this, but again, as soon as they put their ninja onto this card, everything's going to tip, just like the one on the black side did. So this is where physics comes into the game. You have these little pieces, but they are not as heavy as a ninja is. But somehow I'm going to have to find a way to make sure that this whole thing doesn't tip over when my ninja tries to step on this spot. There's no supports underneath on this side. So you probably will want to place some of these extra pieces over here to try and balance things out for your ninja. And it stayed. So now this white ninja is going to try to walk across. He wants to get to this side over here, but I've used all of the pieces in order to balance out that crazy unbalanced side of the floor. Now you can place your ninja any way you want, so you might lie him down like this, which is not easy, but you do have to set him down and let him go. And then we'll move to the next one. Now, I found I was a little shaky doing this. It felt a little nerve-wracking to place these ninjas on these unbalanced floors that aren't even totally flat. Now I've got my ninja here is trapped, and the black ninja is going to have to go next because the white ninja has run out of jutsu, which they were using to balance things out here on their grid. The black ninja might do something similar here with 3 pieces on the opposite side so they can stand on this little part of the floor without tipping it over. So I was successful in doing that. And then now I have to move in front of that bansen seal. This is where it gets tricky. I'm standing where I can claim that seal, but I'm not allowed to claim it until I rotate that floorboard. You may be able to see that there is a circle around the ninja on this little tile, and there are arrows in the circle that point clockwise or counterclockwise, depending on which seal you're going for. That's the direction in which you have to turn the tile. So placing these floorboards becomes a really important part of the strategy. So here I am wanting to grab this, but I have to turn the floor clockwise before I can do that. What you're doing here in a game of floating floors is you are trying to find that balance between placing the paths and the jutsu to balance those paths to support your own movement while sabotaging the other player at the same time. And it does in a 2-player game, and I was only able to play this with 2. My other son was away studying for his exams, so I didn't get to play it with a 3-player or 4-player game, but in a 2-player game, it is a real duel that we quite enjoyed in terms of sabotage versus supporting your own turn. The mechanisms involved in this game are, well, pretty straightforward. You're doing some route building or path building. They've got that dexterity element that includes balancing. So you're balancing the pieces and you're balancing them in a way that your ninja isn't going to disrupt everything as soon as they try to walk across the board. You're balancing your resources also in terms of those jutsu that are so limited. You're starting the game with 6 of those pieces, but my goodness, they get used up fast, too fast really. And you saw just the way that the tiles happen, and there are extra floor tiles, so every game is going to be a little bit different in the way that you shuffle them up. It does make it a real challenge to build those paths without wasting too many of those jutsu. And maybe if you've got a tile like this one where there is a black seal and a white one, you might be trying to sabotage your opponent and place not too many of those jutsu underneath so that the floor is kind of wobbly for them but more sturdy for you. Of course, you're also selecting from a number of different actions that you could take. You're moving your ninja or choosing floorboards or placing jutsu on the board. You might have to rotate floors. So what a combination of dexterity and resource management and route building and that push your luck element of trying to move closer and closer without knocking everything down. It really does combine a lot of things in a game that's fairly simple to learn and to teach. What skills are you practicing by playing a game of floating floors? Well, you've got the fine motor dexterity, the visual motor skills that you're using in order to place these jutsu on the floors without knocking everything down and to move your ninja across that pathway to collect their seals. You've also got the physical balance. You notice what I had to do on these spaces where I could only put the jutsu and balance the floor on 3 corners is I had to really add some extra pieces to the other side to balance things out. So there's the physics element of how do you balance things and weight distribution on this little square like this. It's a nice physics game as well. It's not just about those motor skills. There is the spatial planning that you have to do in order to plan out your pathway and to make use of those 90-degree rotations when you're trying to collect your jutsu. And of course, if you are budgeting your actions, you're trying to make these turns efficient. You're trying to look at the probability that you're going to knock everything off by taking too many moves, and then you'll be messing up your turn. You're budgeting your jutsu in a way that will allow you to be balanced, but maybe unbalance your opponent. Those are all examples of executive functioning skills. And all of these strategy games involve, when you're thinking ahead, they involve those executive functioning skills, the abilities that you need in order to work towards a future goal. And that does include budgeting and thinking ahead and tackling things in an organized, efficient way. Final thoughts about floating floors. Well, the ninja theme is one that I love. I loved reading stories and books about ninjas when I was a kid, movies about ninjas. There used to be lots of ninja movies in the 80s, and I just found them fascinating, reading about that training that they would do and thinking it was just, I always found them to be very interesting. So I love the ninja theme, and it's such a perfect match with that idea of walking across these floating floors and trying to keep your balance without knocking things down. I remember reading a book actually a few years ago about a ninja. It was called Across the Nightingale Floor. And the Nightingale Floor was one that would squeak if you stepped on certain areas. So part of the ninja training was learning to sneak up on the trainer without making the floor squeak that would alert them that you were trying to sneak up on them. So I just think these ninjas are a lot of fun to play with. And this game is great because it's a dexterity game that doesn't end when a player makes a mistake. In a game like Jenga, for example, the person who makes a mistake is the loser. That's the end of the game, and then you have to start over again. This is a great one because mistakes do interfere with your game and mess up your plans, but it's not a game ender. And you're not determining the loser by messing things up. You still have to win the game by collecting those pieces that you need. So I really do like that additional element to a dexterity game where it's not over until a player wins, as opposed to having one player lose the game and everyone else is the winner. You've got that combination of dexterity plus strategy, spatial planning, resource management, mental rotation even. You're trying to figure out how those pathways are going to look and how things will balance when you turn things 90 degrees. So it is a really strategic dexterity game where dexterity is a major component, but it's really the strategy and planning ahead that is going to win you a game of floating floors. It's a game that I want to play it again right away. I want to figure out some tricks and get a little bit better at balancing things out on these floating floors. Now, it is a prototype, and one of the things, like I mentioned earlier, is that I had some problems with keeping everything flat. So some of the pieces you can see aren't completely level, and that might be something that, especially when it's the floor pieces that are a little bit warped, that might affect your ability to, it certainly increases the complexity of the game as it's, sitting on your shelf when you take it off if the pieces aren't completely flat. So you will want to make sure you've got some silica gel in that box, and you may want to sit a book or something on top of these pieces if they do start to get warped a little bit. But that, in a nutshell, is floating floors. I will put a link to the Kickstarter campaign in the show notes below this video. And if you have comments or questions, you can leave them in the comment section of the video, or you can email me at brian@brainsongames.ca. Brainsongames.ca is the website. That's where future episodes will go, and the previous ones are up there already. Brains on Games is the Twitter handle and the Facebook page and the Instagram feed, so we're all over the place. And if you enjoyed this video and you want to be notified of future ones, you can head on over to YouTube and click that subscribe button. Thanks for joining me, and hopefully I'll see you next time.